Hi, welcome to a new video, and as you may have seen in yesterday's weekly news roundup, Ian Bell has announced that A, he's got a new studio, and B, that GTR Revival is coming, which is, as it says, reviving the GTR series. Now, GTR 3 has been in the process of being revived and being revived and dying for well over a decade, but that all needs to get put to one side because this is a completely new endeavour in that regard. And Ian Bell's popped up over at GT Planet and put out a press release there. I don't know where else it's been sent. I only know that it popped up on the forums over at GT Planet, and I'll leave a link to the forum that it's been posted in down below. Now, it's been greeted by a mixture of enthusiasm and understandable scepticism. The understandable scepticism comes from two things, really. One was the dead at arrival, well, not even arrival, dead long before arrival, Madbox console that Slightly Mad Studios were going to bring out and failed spectacularly to do so. And then the second was around the backlash of Project Cars 3 and the way that that was marketed and presented to people versus the final product. Now, I don't want to get into a massive Project Cars 3 discussion here. Suffice to say, I didn't actually think Project Cars 3 was that bad a title. I just think it was marketed and presented as something completely different to what we ended up with. And that was its issue. But there's then also the fact that Project Cars and Project Cars 2 were both good titles that were not supported as long as they should have been by any stretch of the imagination. So as a result, Slightly Mad Studios kind of got a reputation for a bit of a dump and run cash grab, despite starting well with the entire community assisted development program for the original Project Cars. So, there is an understandable degree of scepticism within the sim racing community about Ian Bell and what he goes near, which kind of is a shame because it does overshadow the great work that Studios Ian Bell's worked with and in before Project Cars have put out there, and that is primarily the GTR series. So I just want to go through the press release, give some kind of thoughts from my perspective on it, given where we are now in the world and kind of what the general, not universal, but general view is around Ian and the studios that he's run in the past. So the press release reads, GTR Revival confirmed. Development on GTR Revival confirmed. Core team from GTR and GTR 2 engaged. The spirit of GTR's glorious heritage captured by an entirely new bespoke physics engine. So we'll come on to more about that in a moment. And this was pushed out at Munich, September 2022. Mildly Annoyed Studios, abbreviated to MASS, today confirmed that development on GTR Revival, a new hardcore sim racer utilising many of the key talent that created two of the genre's most beloved titles in GTR and GTR 2, is on track and racing ahead. GTR Revival is a AAA sim racing game made for PlayStation, Xbox Series X/PC and tentatively scheduled for a Q4 2024 release. So we are looking 2 years from now before it comes out. It's the core team behind GTR and GTR 2, and the new studio has an utterly appalling name, Mildly Annoyed Studios, and it's really weirdly capitalised, as you can see. So we're getting a new title. It's going to be a hardcore sim racing title. It talks about PlayStation, Xbox Series X, PC. They are, in terms of consoles, they're almost certainly going to be talking about purely current gen, last gen, PS4, etc. I don't see it coming out for that at all. And we're 2 years away from the focused launch team. So it goes on to say, featuring many of the core team and talent that redefined the sim racing world with a trio of award-winning hits, so GTR, GTR2 and GT Legends, and it's GT Legends footage you're actually watching in the background to this, running with the HQ mods at 4K, and again I'll leave a link to the HQ mod etc down below if you're interested in that. It goes on to say, GTR Revival is an unapologetic throwback to a time when sim racing was about realistic handling and physics, immersive bone-rattling action and technological advancement. I'm not quite sure that it's a throwback approach, because if anything, sim racing has grown more to be about realistic handling and physics. The immersive bone-rattling action, yeah, that is one thing that arguably the teams that have been run by Ian Bell have focused on, getting that kind of visceral feeling of racing in there. Probably best epitomised by a non-hardcore sim title, which is the 2 Shift titles, which really dialed that up to 11 in a Hollywood style. But, you know, technological advancement and realistic handling and physics, these are where sim racing has been moving, even in the more casual approach, over the last few decades anyway. So it's kind of, it has to be said by the team in the press release, but this is not something that is unheard of. So GTR Revival is a hardcore racer that is driven by an entirely new bespoke physics engine created specifically for the game, allied to the unsurpassed graphics from the Unreal Engine 5. The game will feel like a generational leap in the same way that GTR revolutionised the genre almost 2 decades ago. And that second part there is true. GTR did do that in a lot of ways. An entirely new bespoke physics engine, that's great news, depending on what we get out of it as an end result, but it at least helps divorce things from the, I personally think, incorrect and odd hatred that people have for the Madness engine. Some people just can't stand the Madness engine, and I swear a lot of them rag on it without actually seeing where it got to and where it currently is, particularly in titles like AMS2, or rather in AMS2 itself. And Unreal Engine 5, yeah, run properly, that has the potential to deliver some absolutely astounding graphics in it. The issue I've got here is really the Lessons from Assetto Corsa Competizione, which is a great looking title with a solid physics engine behind it, but taking a bespoke physics engine and plugging it into Unreal Engine, unless something significant has changed between Unreal 4 and Unreal 5, is the fact that it's not the most efficient way of doing things. And from an optimization point of view, I think it will be a very brave person to say that Assetto Corsa Competizione is well optimized. It really struggles on console, even current gen consoles, and you need a bit of a beefy PC to be able to run it, particularly if you want to run VR on it. So that combination, whilst it's got the potential to offer an awful lot, and I don't know how well, as I say, Unreal Engine 5 plays with bespoke physics engines, if it's following the path that we saw with Unreal Engine 4 and Assetto Corsa Competizione, we've got a potential issue there for optimization and getting the most out of available hardware, be it on console or PC. So that does raise a few question marks and a little bit of a concern for me in that regard. The next sentence, however, I'm really happy to see. Modders will be thrilled to hear that the modding scene in GTR 2 that inspired a generation of modders and future developers is front and central in GTR Revival's design. So what they're saying there is it will support mods. And, you know, if you look at GT Legends, GTR 2, even Race 07, which although they don't mention it, is related to those titles, plus the GTR Evolution pack that came out with that. These are titles that are still supported by modders to this day, and you know their lifespan has been massively extended beyond what anybody I would imagine thought was possible by mods. So that GTR Revival will support mods is excellent news. What tool sets will be in there and how easy it is for people to produce quality mods, how easy they will be to install and manage, all of these things are questions that are up in the air at the present moment, but simply the news that it will support mods is really important. Goes on then to talk about cars. So GTR Revival also showcases an all-star lineup of sports cars that evolved through racing's past and present, and which racers will be invited to unleash on only the very elite of playgrounds. Now, reading between the marketing lines there, that tells us a few things. One, we're going to have historic as well as current sports cars in there. It's not focusing purely on the word GT in terms of classification, so hopefully we will get more than just GT cars, and that's always occurred in some of the past Simbin titles, so we can expect that, and we will be invited to unleash them on only the very elite of playgrounds. Now, if I had to be cynical, that means we're going to have a low track count and they're going to rely on modders to up that track count. What they consider the very elite of playgrounds stroke circuits, we will have to see, and we've got a long time to go before that. Then moving on, GTR Revival has been designed from the ground up with the modern sim racer in mind. Every game mode for every level of commitment. It will also herald the return of the much loved GTR driving school for a whole new generation of racers. So what we've got there is a little bit of the Project Cars 3 speak coming through. It's again, we're getting hints of promising everything to everybody, and no title at all has ever managed to deliver that. So again, these kind of comments do make me wary. The fact that it's going to have the GTR driving school in there, that's great. That's really good. It brought the kind of Gran Turismo license testy bits to PC before I think just about anybody else did, so it is really good to see that. We then move on to some quotes from the team. So Ian Bell, CEO at Mass, says GTR Revival isn't about content and car lists and track counts and micro purchases at the back end. It's about bringing back the spirit of GTR. Our content will be all killer and no filler as we bring the ethos of the genre, balls out, hardcore glory. We're now free to make the kind of game we want to make, and funnily enough, that was exactly what inspired this team almost 20 years ago to make GTR. Now, that kind of forgets that he ran his own studio under Slightly Mad Studios and said exactly the same thing about Project Cars, only then to not support it as it went forward. So, this is not, in all honesty, in the first opportunity you've had to do this by any stretch of the imagination. But we're getting into the marketing speak here. It isn't all about content and car lists and track counts. So again, we're probably looking at limited content at launch here, with the mods being used to build up on that. Not necessarily anything wrong with that, so long as it is well curated. And the one thing I will say is that just about every single title Ian Bell and the studios and teams he's run have put out has had exactly that. Their track and car lists have always historically been incredibly well curated and put together, so it's good to see that, in all honesty. I'm quite happy to hear that. The rest of it, all killer, no filler, it's kind of standard Ian Bell here. We then move on to AJ Weber, Physics and Simulation Director at Mass, who said, when Ian approached me about making a new GTR-inspired sim, I said yes without even thinking about it. My only proviso, it had to get real. When Ian told me the Pro version will be the shipped base version, I knew I'd made the right decision. For anybody who works in the industry, the chance to create an entirely new engine from scratch without the constraints of old architecture of corporate busybodies wanting to tone down realism for sales is pretty much the dream. Working on the spiritual follow-up to GTR is an absolute thrill and a massive responsibility. So again, this is good stuff to hear. We've still got a long way to see where it comes. The one interesting thing there is about the Pro version and the shipped base version. Now, what's generally not common knowledge is that a lot of the higher or end or hardcore sims out there have two versions of them. They have a retail version of it, so Assetto Corsa, as we all know, is Assetto Corsa, but there is also Assetto Corsa Pro, which is a commercial product aimed at sims used by OEMs. So if memory serves me, I think Porsche use Assetto Corsa, and possibly Ferrari use Assetto Corsa Pro as their in-house simulator for their simulator studios and things like that, and their commercial ventures. And the difference between them is hard to know because it's incredibly difficult to get the opportunity to do a back-to-back test between the two, but there is always the speculation that the pro versions, have the simulation aspect turned up to 11 because they've got almost zero constraints on the hardware that they're running on. An OEM, an automotive manufacturer, is not going to shortchange buying the PCs that are going to run this stuff on there, so they can go completely mental with it in that regard. So normally, at hardcore, for want of a better term to use, and to use Ian Bell's terminology and the press release's terminology, the hardcore titles normally have this retail version and this pro commercial product. And what they're saying here, or rather what AJ Weber is saying, is that they will be one and the same thing. There will be no differentiation between what we get as a retail product and what the commercial version of it will be. Now, they've not announced any commercial partners, so we'll have to wait and see in regards to that. And then the final bit we've got is Stephen Baystead, audio and music director at MAS, said, "To this day, people still come up and tell me the audio qualities of GTR and GTR2 have remained unmatched in the sim racing world. What I tell them is what was possible 20 years ago is but a drop in the ocean compared to what we can create today. I can't tell you how excited I am about developments on GTR Revival." Now, the fact that they're taking the audio side of it seriously is great news. There's an awful lot of titles out there that don't take it as seriously as it could be, but I do have to raise issue with, the GTR and GTR2 have remained unmatched in the sim racing world. People may well tell him that, but quite frankly, it's not true. There are plenty of titles out there that have both matched and exceeded the audio qualities of GTR and GTR2, and I was playing GTR2 earlier this week, so it's not as though I'm relying on distant memory for this either. So it's good that they take the audio side of things seriously, but it needs a reality check there if they're still using GTR and GTR2 as their benchmark that they're going to improve on. They need to look at other titles in the market and see what they've done audio wise. And titles like, off the top of my head, Race Room have some excellent audio in there that I would, without a shadow of a doubt, put above either of the GTR titles in terms of their audio qualities, their accuracy. And then you get a lot of titles out there that have done astounding work with audio placement as well, spatial positioning of audio sounds, being able to place cars around you when you're driving, these kind of things. There's a lot that's been done, and the genre and what's out there audio wise has moved on significantly from the first two GTR titles. That I do agree on, and that's what it needs to be benchmarked on. So those are my thoughts on the press release that we've had come out alongside this. My apologies that you've just been watching some footage on a bit of a loop here, but I wanted to get this out there and start talking about it. Am I looking forward to GTR Revival, and will I be paying attention to what's said about it over the next 2 years? Absolutely. I've always had a soft spot for the titles that have been put out by Ian Bell and his studios. There have been some absolutely groundbreaking stuff that's come out. I personally do rate the Madness engine, both in its Project Cars iterations and its, 5 final form that we're seeing out in AMS2, so I know he can run teams that can produce excellent physics engines as well. My main concern is that lack of long-term commitment by the studios that Ian's run in the past. You know, the fact that Project Cars 2 could and should have been supported a hell of a lot longer than it was, and if it had have been, I honestly think that, you know, it would hold a much greater place in more people's minds around the sim racing community than it does now. So it's not the fact that I don't think he can put a good, solid, polished product out there. I definitely think he can, and I think he's got the team to do that. It's whether that product will then get the long-term support that it needs to grow and thrive, and that for me is the single biggest question around this. So those are my thoughts on the GTR Revival press release and the info we have on it soon. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, please do hit the like button, and if you want to see more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified when new content gets uploaded. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye.